FiLMiC Remote lets you monitor and control FiLMiC Pro, but from another device, like another smartphone or tablet. While the app has been around for a while, the full app has only been available for iPhones. However, there is an early access version of FiLMiC Remote for Android, and I've been giving it a try. Monitoring and controlling your smartphone camera remotely is extremely useful when you're vlogging. Without a flip-out screen, it's almost impossible to set your framing, exposure, and focus correctly. So, FiLMiC Remote is invaluable for vlogging, and in the last few weeks, I've been testing it, and I've found it to be a bit of a lifesaver. But vlogging is not the only thing this app is useful for. For example, if you're filming with your smartphone, one of the great things about such a small camera is being able to set it up in places a regular camera wouldn't fit or would be too heavy. However, monitoring and accessing the manual controls can be difficult or basically impossible. But having a remote device enables you to capture those shots much easier. To use FiLMiC Remote, you'll need a second device for monitoring and the FiLMiC Remote app. Of course, you'll also need the FiLMiC Pro app installed on your primary device. Now, I've had these two Samsung S9s for a couple of years, so it's easy for me to use one for filming and one for FiLMiC Remote. Maybe you have an old smartphone that you don't use anymore. Now, this could be your FiLMiC Remote device. As it's just for monitoring and controlling the primary camera, the quality of its own camera is irrelevant. You won't be using it. Just imagine that this old phone is like your TV remote. Your TV remote doesn't have any effect on the quality of your TV. First of all, if using Android, make sure both devices are connected to Wi-Fi. If you're using iOS, there are actually 3 connection methods available. But because the Android version is still in testing mode, only Wi-Fi connection works. So for now, that makes it pretty difficult when filming outside. Once both devices are connected to the same Wi-Fi, open FiLMiC Pro on your primary device. Go to the settings menu, click device, scroll to and toggle on FiLMiC Remote. So at this point, at least on my device, FiLMiC Pro allows me to give this device a custom name. Now, I've decided to call mine S9 Primary, but you can leave the default name if you want. Now open FiLMiC Remote on your secondary device. The app will now scan for devices using FiLMiC Pro with FiLMiC Remote switched on. As you can see, it's found my primary device, the S9 Primary. So now I just tap on the name and Remote should take over control of FiLMiC Pro on the primary device. As far as I know, you can do anything remotely that you could do using FiLMiC Pro directly. So that means checking framing, all the exposure controls, white balance, focus, and so on. As soon as it opens up, you are presented with the familiar FiLMiC Pro screen, except this is the screen from your other device. Meanwhile, FiLMiC Pro on the primary device will inform you that control has been taken over by a remote device. This means you can no longer control FiLMiC Pro on that device and you must use the second remote device. Obviously, most likely you will just use this screen if you're using remote mostly for control purposes. But there are 2 other options. So to access these, tap the arrow menu icon at the top left of the screen. A menu opens with 3 options. The first option looks like a record button, and this is the default manual control mode. The second option is an icon of 4 squares, and this opens up the monitor mode. In monitor mode, you get a live preview in the top left, plus some live analytics. Bottom left shows you a snapshot of the brightness levels in the frame, and top right is a vector scope displaying color saturation. And finally, bottom right are some more live analytics meters with 4 further options to pick from. And these 4 selectable histograms are luminance, zone, RGB channel, and RGB composite. I haven't really played with those too much, but to be honest, I don't really use these kind of histograms too often. I just don't get that slowed down by this kind of stuff. Let's just say I don't like to spend so much time For me, the beauty of smartphone filmmaking is the speed of it, and so therefore I haven't really looked into those too much. Maybe I will one day, but if this is something that you enjoy using, then that's something for you to investigate there. Director mode. So now if you click on the eye icon, you get Sauron's Eye mode, which allows you to attempt to enslave a complex medieval-style society using dark supernatural powers and magic rings. At least, that's what I hoped it would do. Unfortunately, all it does is fill the screen with the view from the primary device. Honestly, we should all complain to FiLMiC about this, because for $249 I expect nothing less than the powers of the creator of the One Ring. Anyway, I guess we might find a use for this mode, such as if we wanted to see the frame full screen, but without the FiLMiC Pro user interface. Although I haven't tried this yet, another use for remote would be to use a tablet and have a bigger screen for monitoring and operating FiLMiC Pro. You know, quite often you can miss things when you're monitoring with a small screen, like getting accurate focus, for example. Only when you watch the footage back later on a bigger screen, that's when the mistakes become obvious. So having a bigger screen for monitoring using FiLMiC Remote with a tablet, for example, and you'll get a much bigger monitoring screen, and so it'll be much easier to get things like focus correct. The FiLMiC Remote app is not free, but currently the app costs $9.99 for iOS, and it cost me £2.49 for the Android version here in the UK, and presumably in the US the Android version of FiLMiC Remote will cost $2.49. As I mentioned, while Android devices must be connected via Wi-Fi, iPhones have two other options, peer-to-peer and Ethernet. One problem with connecting via Wi-Fi is that there will be a brief delay between moving a control in Remote and that control taking effect in FiLMiC Pro. For example, if you wanted to use Remote for focus changes during a shot, the delay will make it very hard to get right if the focus change needs to be synchronized with action or camera movement. To choose the peer-to-peer option, you need to enable Wi-Fi in both devices, but disconnect from any existing Wi-Fi. Once you've done that, you can connect the two devices to each other via Wi-Fi. Therefore, you won't need an external Wi-Fi signal, which means you can film outside. Now, FiLMiC say the maximum range using this method is about 15 feet, which is 4.5 meters. The Ethernet option looks quite a bit more complicated, I'd say, and involves extra cables, but you can check out FiLMic's tutorial on how to set that up. I'll put a link in the description. The big advantage of this method is you get latency-free monitoring, so there'll be no lag between changes made via Remote and FiLMiC on your primary device. So on the downside, you're going to need more cables, which means more bulk, less flexibility, and in some cases you'll need an extra power source. So one thing I haven't mentioned so far, one last thing really, which is the top right corner. You can see a symbol, an icon, interlocked circles. You get the option to disconnect Remote from FiLMiC Pro on your primary device. In terms of bugs and things, like I say, there's always going to be a lag when you're using Wi-Fi. No way of getting around that. There's just one thing that does tend to happen, or at least when I first downloaded it, it would quite often disconnect. But one good thing is that when it does disconnect, if you're recording at the time, it just carries on recording, so that when you connect, it's quite easy just to tap and click connect again, and then it's still going. And whereas if you disconnect and you're not recording, you can sometimes find, I think you always find, at least on my S9, that the settings have gone. The settings of, you know how it does that, where it sort of forgets the settings, especially when you're viewing a shot that you've just taken and you want to just check it out. When you click away from it, you find that all the settings have kind of reset, and so you have to go back and put everything back. And it's the same when you disconnect, when this sort of disconnects itself, or when you disconnect and then connect back. But I think it's actually more stable now. I think they've improved things. They've been working on it. The Android version is a beta, so it's just in trial mode. And but yeah, it seems to be working okay now. Like, it hasn't disconnected for this whole time that I've been filming this. So that's it for this video. I think it's quite a useful little tool. At the moment for Android it's only $2.49, so snap that up if you think it's something that you might use even in the future, because the good thing about FiLMiC is they seem to just charge you once for an app at the moment anyway, and that's it for life. So get in now while it's cheap and try it out and give them feedback and let them know how it's working on your device, for Android that is, and like and subscribe. Have you liked and subscribed and click the bell thing? You better.
Wait in 4 seconds.
Just
yeah,
wait.
do the same thing you guys did, and I'll work out the rest.
Are we set?
Camera speed. Thank you.
Set.
Action.
And go. Okay, you guys go now.
Go. Action. Cut. Camera speed. Thank you. Okay, and set.
Action.
And go. Okay, you guys go now.
Go. Action.